Hey everybody, this is Hondo Carpenter, your Las Vegas Raiders beat writer on SI and the host of the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. And we are excited to have you today. We got a lot going on. I just got done talking to Raheem Mostert, the new Raider running back. You can go watch his video. We have that up for you. A lot of details there about him. We're going to get to a lot of subjects tonight. We're talking draft and getting into a ton of subjects. But before we do, I want to read an email and bring a guest on. Dear Uncle Hondo, would appreciate it if you can bring your friend who covers the Dolphins on to talk about Raheem. Would really like to get his perspective. Thanks so much. That is from Pete and N. Pete N. So, Pete, without any further ado, he's from Tacoma, Washington. Pete is. Let's bring in my man, Alan Poupar, the beat writer covering the Miami Dolphins on SI. Alan, I want to give you a little bit perspective of what the Raiders think they're getting. And then I want to hear your perspective as a guy with a front row view who knows him, what you think. First of all, they think they're getting a guy who's going to be a class act in the locker room. Players love him, players trust him, no issues whatsoever out in the community. He's a pro's pro. He shows up on time, he works hard, he takes care of his body. Raiders are very young and going to get younger in the running back room in the NFL draft. 2 years ago, he was lights out. Last year, battled injuries. I believe that at least what we're hearing is that Miami let him go because they felt like he was on a downward trajectory. He does his physical. The Raiders think it was a pause because of injury. We're going to find out who is right, but that's what the Raiders think. They get a quality guy, quality player who's not going to do anything to hurt their locker room. You were the beat writer. You know him. You covered him. Give me your perspective, brother.
Uh, Completely agree with you on the first part that you're getting a really, really good dude. I think, as I mentioned to you earlier, he was the recipient of the Dolphins Good Guy Award, I'll say 2 or 3 years ago, for his dealings with the media. Completely class act. You could hardly find a nicer guy. He's been around the block. I think he first got into the NFL in 2015. Took him a while to get his career going. So he's not your typical, what's his like 10-year veteran at running back where you would be worried about the whole lot of wear and tear, even though he has been around for a while and he is turning 33, I want to say, in a little bit. So he's got the personality to serve as a good mentor for young running backs, which is what he did with the Dolphins last year when they had a second-year player in Devon Achane and a rookie in Jalen Wright. As far as his performance, there is reason to be concerned about whether he's on the decline because of his age and because he's been around a bit. He has had some injuries, not just last year, but in years past. In 2023, he didn't. And when he didn't, he set a Dolphin franchise record for rushing touchdowns with 18 and overall touchdowns with 21, and had his first 1,000-yard season of his career. Last year, it was a nightmare for Raheem from beginning to end, starting in the opener against Jacksonville when he sustained an injury, took a shot in the ribs. It kind of slowed him down. It sidelined him for maybe a game or two, I want to say, came back, and then later on in the season mentioned that he may have had like a fractured bone in the chest, which obviously is an issue. Then what happened is he got a couple of costly fumbles in games around the middle of the season after Tua Tagovailoa came back from his injury at Indianapolis, at Buffalo. 2 games the Dolphins lost by 6 and 3 points. And then his playing time dwindled because of that. And then it was less like a rolling ball effect. The term escapes me right now. You'll have to forgive me. Where he got fewer opportunities. The offensive line did not have a great season in front of him. The one area where it was on him was in the inability to break tackles. If you trust those metrics on Pro Football Reference, he was credited for breaking 1 tackle the entire season. And I believe he was last or next to last in the entire NFL among running backs in terms of percentage of broken tackles per rushing attempt. So the question is, okay, was this the beginning of the end for Raheem, or was it an aberration, a bad year, where one of those where Murphy's Law, everything goes wrong, starting with the injury in the opener?
Hmm. Interesting stuff from you. I, the thing is, I want to go back because I was told that one of the things that appeals about him to a lot of people is he's a very smart football mind. He doesn't just know what the running back's job is. He knows offensive linemen, wide receivers, tight ends, and he'll go and coach young players and help them. That he really sees his role, whether he's a captain or not, he acts like it. And he knows everybody's job because he's a film nut and a playbook nut. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, the other part of it that's good is he's not one of those players who's going to be worried about, well, I'm not helping the young guy who can take carries from me. He kind of like he will take on the role of the veteran and
Mm.
embrace it. And it's you would think that it's something that should be universal. It's not. You've been around long enough to know that not every single solitary player is like that. He is definitely one of those. He's an ultimate team player. Um, when he was losing snaps last year, he admitted that he didn't like it, but he was like, "Dude, you never heard like any word of frustration or like complaining from him." So he's a great team player from that sense. And yes, he's a guy who's very football smart, been around, like I said, a long time, played in different schemes, and he also understands the value of perseverance and overcoming adversity, considering his career was stop and start. Took him like 6 teams before he finally latched on with the 49ers back in 2017, 2018. So he's from an intangible standpoint, yeah, he's a great guy to have on our roster.
Last question for me about Raheem, and then I can't let you in here without talking Dolphins real quick. But when you look at him and the intangibles he brings, the Raiders didn't overspend for him, so they got him for a very easy price. To me, this is a sign of where the Raiders are going. They're investors, they're not gamblers. So for me, I like the signing because they didn't overpay. They did nothing dumb. They're still looking to, they want to improve the running back position. So for me, it was very safe. I understand why Miami let him go, but I also think it was very smart of the Raiders. Do you read the situation like that?
Yeah, for a team again that's got a lot of youth, for the Raiders, he makes perfect sense. It made sense. It figured the Dolphins were going to let him go, and the writing was on the wall for Raheem. Pardon the cliche. Last year they extended his contract, but what they did is they front loaded it with a nice signing bonus to where he was easily cuttable after the season. And as I mentioned, the two young running backs they have ahead of him, Devon Achane and Jalen Wright, they spent a third-round pick on Achane and a fourth-round pick on Wright last year after trading a third-round pick to the Eagles to get him. So those are the guys they're going to run with. And with the amount of salary cap they could save, which was like $3 million by releasing Mostert, if he wasn't going to have a season that came close or looked, he wasn't going to match what he did in 2023. But if the numbers fell off and the production fell off, it kind of felt like he was going to be gone because of the age and because of the commitment to the young guys. For a team like the Raiders, starting the new program under Pete Carroll, who are going to be a pretty young team, absolutely, it's a really good pickup on their part.
Right. Let's switch gears. I can't let you leave without talking about the Miami Dolphins. I know that this is me saying it, not you.
Okay.
This is Hondo opinion. Mike McDaniels to me is a dead man walking. It just it's got that feel. Talking to people around the league, it just seems like it's I'm trying to use the right word. I'm trying to use a word that I had an executive use at the combine. It just almost feels like it's a marriage that you just look at. Boy, unless something amazing happens, it's headed towards a crash. Do you agree with that, or is that a little too hyperbole?
Well, the fact that there was some whispering at the end of last year about the job security, more so of GM Chris Greer, but also a little bit of Mike McDaniel, but that was more fan driven than it was maybe media reality. And then Stephen Ross coming out with a statement the night of season finale, where he was kind of, said it as sternly as he can possibly say it. I expect better results. We're not going to be, satisfied with this again. Yeah, I think there's a I don't want to say there's a target on his back as well as Chris Greer, but they have to produce. If it's another playoff-less season, there could be changes in Miami in the next offseason. It also depends on how it's done. Injuries have been an issue for this team. If they let go, if they miss the playoffs by a game, and it's injured because of injuries, or largely because of injuries, that might buy him a retrieve. But it almost feels like playoffs or bust for McDaniel.
All right, I'm going to ask you this one. So the Raiders, the more quarterbacks that go before the Raiders pick, the more valuable their pick is going to become.
Mhm.
Because the NFL does not believe, I've talked to too many executives, they think Cam Ward's the best quarterback. The only two quarterbacks that they have first round grades are Cam Ward and Jackson Dart, and Jackson Dart is a bottom third of the first round rating on the executives that I talk to. But a lot of people think there could be three quarterbacks gone by the time the Raiders pick. And so if everything goes according to whole, which is obviously from playing cards, I think the Raiders would love to trade down and pick up some picks. I think if in a perfect world, I think two or three quarterbacks go before they pick. They're able to trade down and still get who they want. But at the end of the day, what do you think happens in Miami? Who do you think they walk away with? Who do you think they're targeting?
Well, right now, based on what they've done in free agency, they have glaring, and I mean glaring with a capital G, holes at defensive tackle, cornerback, and safety. I know the offensive line is always talked about. There's an uncertainty about Teron Armstead, whether he'll be back in 2025 for a 13th NFL season. If they don't, the Dolphins selected Patrick Paul in the second round last year. Logically, he slides into his spot. Um, and I don't necessarily buy the idea that they're going to take a guard in the first round. So I'm going to guess it's going to be one of those three positions. So to me, I would zero in on guys like Malachi Stark, safety from Georgia, could be a possibility with the idea of the Dolphins using him in a Kyle Hamilton type of role. Because remember, their DC Anthony Weaver came over from Baltimore, so he's seen that. I think a cornerback makes an awful lot of sense, whether it be Will Johnson from Michigan, or Jade Barron from Texas, and potentially an interior defensive lineman. And the guy would look at Mason Graham from Michigan is expected widely to be like a top 7 pick at worst. His teammate at Michigan is really, really interesting. Kenneth Grant, who's like a huge guy who can move. There's a famous clip of him on YouTube where he's chasing a guy downfield 30 yards and he doesn't move like a guy who's 6'4", 330. He's very intriguing. So to me, I think I would kind of zero in on one of those 4 guys.
Awesome. He's the great Alan Poupar. Alan, can you tell everybody where to find you on social media, please?
Sure. It's my last name, Poupart, Poupart, NFL.
Awesome. Check him out. Find him. He's worth the follow. He is hands down the best Miami Dolphins beat writer, and he does such a terrific job. And on top of it, great father, tremendous husband. And I'm just proud. Shannon and I just love he and his family. They are not just people I work with. They are genuine friends that we love and care for. Thanks for joining us tonight, buddy.
Absolutely. Anytime, Hondo.
He is the one, the only, the great Alan Poupart. Nice. All right. So let's keep going now. We're going to spend some time. We're going to spend some time answering some email. I got a lot of questions here from you, and I want to get into as many as I can. I'm not going to be able to get into them all, but I'm going to get into a few of them. The first one comes to us from Bridget B. Bridget B is in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Bridget B says, Hondo, can you explain about all of the Gene T hype? Yes. I laugh because I do a mock and I don't have the Raiders taking Gene T, and everyone's like, Hondo's off on Gene T. No, I'm not. He's a great player. He is a great player. A lot of people believe he's the best running back since Saquon. They don't think he's Saquon. I'm not saying that, but he's the best since Saquon. That says a lot about him. I know that the Raiders love him. I think he would be a great addition for the Raiders. Now, let me make this abundantly clear. I think he's worth the 6th pick. But ideally, I think the Raiders would love to trade down a little bit, pick up some more picks, and get Gene or O'Marion Hampton. Now, they love O'Marion Hampton as well. Not as much as Gene, but it's close. And so if they trade down and lose Gene but get O'Marion Hampton, I think they're happy with that. And then get more picks. But I think ideally they would love to trade, but the more quarterbacks, well, we'll get to that in a minute. But I don't know where that came from. There, just because I didn't have them taking them in a first round of a mock, doesn't mean there's hate at all. So thank you for asking, Bridget. The next one comes to us from Martin, and it's Martin P. Martin P says, Hondo, I wish you would explain to me your thought process when it comes to the draft. I really like the way that you talk about building from the lines. I think it's just sensible. I would love to get Gene T. I think he's great, but I would rather see the Raiders keep building the lines. Less risk in the first round, more surety in the first round, and I like it. In fact, I think you had a Michael France on last year who talked about offensive linemen and defensive linemen are some of the surest picks in the first round, where quarterbacks only about 40% make it. Yeah, that is accurate, Martin. And I just believe in that. If I was an NFL general manager, unless there was a generational talent at a position that can make generational impacts, I absolutely would go offensive or defensive line. So let me give you an example. Okay. First of all, I really like Calvin Johnson. I love his parents. Getting to cover him in Detroit was an honor. Wonderful. He's not a kid anymore, but he was a kid then. Great family, really good people. But I thought the Lions selecting Calvin Johnson was a huge mistake. I said this when I talked about Devontae. A wide receiver at most impacts a game 15 plays a game. At most. At most. But an offensive lineman or defensive lineman can impact it 65 plays a game. Just purely. Now, if you're a wide receiver away from going to a Super Bowl, you pick a wide receiver in the first round. But the Lions weren't. And I remember saying, and I know that Matt Millen really liked Calvin, but wanted to go in a different direction. But the organization, even though Matt was the GM, wanted to go. Remember when the Lions took like 3 or 4? It was Roy Williams, Mike Williams, Charles Rogers, and Calvin Johnson. I mean, they took 4 wide receivers in the first round, and none of them got him anywhere. Those are luxury picks. You can get a lot of really good receivers later in the draft. So I love Tet. I think Tet is a great player. A great player. I wouldn't call him generational. He's not a dude. Do I think he could become one? I do. Do I think he could become a generational player? I do. Do I think he's a generational player now and a dude? I do not. When you're picking at 6, you got to get dudes. You got to get dudes. And if you can't trade, you got to pick the guy that you think is the best shot of being a dude, because you can't miss at 6. It sets your franchise back. So again, I really like Ted. I think Ted is a really good player. And if the Raiders were a wide receiver away, I would say grab Ted, period, game, set, match. But they're not. And it was the same situation with Calvin Johnson when the Raiders picked Calvin. I was critical of the pick, not because it was Calvin. And I remember talking to Calvin about that. And I said, Calvin, you need to understand, I think you're a dude. I think you're a generational talent. And he was. But how much did the Lions win? So again, if that is, it's not a slam on Tet. It's not a slam on now Gene T. He's going to impact a lot more than 15. He's going to, he'd probably run 20 to 25 times a game, probably be involved in, 10 to 15 passing situations, because he's tough. He'll block. All of a sudden now he's involved in 40. I'd have zero problems if the Raiders came out of this draft with Gene T at 6. I think there's a couple other guys that I would take before Gene T at 6. And if I'm Spy Tech, I want to trade out of that and get Gene T a little lower. But no, it's there's zero animus. It's just smart drafting. And that's where the Raiders have to get to, and it's where they're going. It's where they're going. Next one says, Hondo, I really enjoyed your question today about to Raheem Mostert when you asked him about where does he see his role in the Chip Kelly, Pete Carroll offense. Thought it was really good. I'd like to get your impressions after talking to him today. I like him. I think this is a great, great get. I'm not fooling myself. He's not young. This is his 11th year, and he's coming off a major injury, but the Raiders got him at a very fair price. If last year was an abnormality, Raiders strike gold. If it wasn't, they get a presence in their locker room for a young running back room that is great. The Raiders were not gamblers, they were investors. And I thought he was a great addition. And on top of it, he really is a terrific guy. Next one comes to us from Barry C. Barry says, Hondo, could you tell me if you were the football god, who would you give the Raiders as a gift at 6? Abdul Carter. I think I've addressed this one before. I don't know how this got through, but Abdul Carter. Abdul Carter. There are several players I think the Raiders could get at 6 and be very happy. But if you're asking me the one player, if the Raiders could get any guy, Abdul Carter. He's a dude. He's a dude. Next one comes to us from Thomas F. Thomas F. in Stockton, California. Thomas said, Hondo, I like the idea about the Raiders trading. That makes a lot of sense to me. I want my team to pick up more picks. We're not one guy away. So I think that is a great idea. I'm wondering how much you think Jalen Milroe's 40-yard dash impacts him at your third round projection. Somebody is going to, let me listen. I told you this before. Almost every NFL executive I talk to who I trust at drafting quarterback tells me they believe as many as 6 quarterbacks can go in the first round. They only think there's 2 with a first round grade. Only 2. So there's a lot of people that think Jalen's going to go in the first round. Now, there are a lot of teams that are good teams, but not good quarterback drafters. Look at the Steelers. You could make a legitimate argument that the Steelers are not a good team when it comes to quarterback. We know that Jalen went out to dinner with Mike Tomlin. Maybe he ends up there. I think there's a good chance Quinn Ewers ends up at Pittsburgh as well. So, I mean, look at this. If you get Shador, who's going to go in the first round, he's going to go. Cam Ward, Jackson Dart. I think that's an absolute no-brainer. All 3 of those guys will go in the first round. Quinn Ewers is a potential. Milroe is a potential. And I think you could maybe see a couple of other guys sneak in there. I think it's way too early. And if somebody hits and a guy's great, listen, I don't care who you are. If I'm sitting there and I think my quarterback of the future, my franchise quarterback is Jalen Milroe, I pick him. I absolutely pick him. If I'm 100% convinced, now I have to know I'm risking my job on Jalen. But if I'm convinced he's that guy, I'm a person who wants to operate off of my firm belief. My firm belief. So that is where I operate on. But again, the teams that I trust, think a lot more are going to go. And the more they go, the more valuable the Raiders are. And that's why the Raiders in this draft are really the wild card. Because everyone's kind of wondering, what are the Raiders going to do? They filled these holes enough that they could wait on just about every position. So who are they going to take? So all of a sudden you're sitting there and you really want Tet. Okay, you really want Tet, or you want an offensive lineman, and Will Campbell's off the board and Banks is off the board, or maybe Banks is there. But you think, man, Raiders may take Banks. You're there and you want Mason Graham. And he's there. Man, I think the Raiders could take him. And I think they could. Maybe you're somebody who really loves Jalen Walker. And the Raiders brought him in for a top 30 visit, and you know they like him. And he's a stud. I love watching Jalen Walker. He is a guy that I will be surprised when his career is over if he hasn't developed into a dude. I'm not calling him a dude today. He's not. But I would not be surprised if he developed into that. But there's a lot of those guys. And so the Raiders really control the cards right now. The Raiders literally own all of the cards right now. And a lot of teams are looking at the Raiders. And I'm just telling you, the more quarterbacks that go, the more valuable the pick becomes. Just the way it is. And I can also add this too. If quarterbacks don't go, if all of a sudden the 5 teams in front of the Raiders, and you know the Jags won't, but if the 5 teams in front of the Raiders, the 4 teams other than not named Jags, and I think a team could trade with the Jags to get ahead of the Raiders if a Cam Ward or a Shador drops, maybe a Jackson. Not sure about that, but maybe on Jackson, because Jacksonville doesn't need a quarterback. But a lot of intrigue here. Absolute ton of intrigue. Last question I'm going to get to tonight as far as football. Then I'm going to answer probably 2 quick questions that have nothing to do with football, because I always give you that warning. So here's my last football question. Hondo, are you hearing about the Raiders showing any interest in some other free agents? I am. But again, investors. I also am hearing about the potential of a couple of trades. We'll just have to wait and see how this thing all plays out. Gonna have to wait and see how the whole thing plays out. There are some dominoes that are going to fall before the draft. And so we're watching it tightly and closely. Okay, for all of you that don't like non-football questions, you can leave now. 2 quick non-football questions. This one comes to us from Terry T. Terry T says, Hondo, I saw you wearing it looked like a jersey last night. What was that jersey? What do you mean, what was that jersey? It was the famous winged wheel. It was the Detroit Red Wings, Gordie Howe, the greatest hockey player of all time. You say, what? What? Come on now, Hondo. Isn't that Gretzky? All right, I'm going to tell you a story. Wayne Gretzky once told me Gordie Howe was the best. What do you think of that? And then tonight, I am wearing Bobby Boucher's jersey. If you don't know who Bobby Boucher is, one of the greatest linebackers, all around football players. Shame he didn't win a Heisman. Google him, Bobby Boucher. And this is his jersey from the Bourbon Bowl. Check it out, kids. What a performance that Bourbon Bowl was. What a performance, career. Check out Bobby Boucher. It's a shame he never got a chance to play in the NFL. And by the way, I had this jersey a long time before Max Crosby. I know Max wore it a couple of years ago and everybody saw it. I had it a long time before. It may be, it's not my favorite, but one of my favorite jerseys. All right. Last one. Somebody says, Hondo, there's a sign behind your head right here that says always. I just noticed it. My wife and I were talking, and my wife says it probably is there to remind you that you always love your wife. And I thought just, oh, that always probably had something to do with something your dad said. Just curious, can you tell us what it's about? And that is from Robin and Robin and Chad. Yeah, I'll tell you what it is. It's a 2 Corinthians 2:14. The Apostle Paul wrote and said, "Glory be to God who always causes me to triumph." And so years ago, for many, many years, I had that written on a Post-it note. I was reading my Bible one day. This would have been back in 1991, September in 91. I was doing devotions. And when I read it, it just really clicked with me that no matter what's in, when I read it, I was going through a really hard time. And I just said, no matter what I go through, God always causes a way for me to triumph. Always. And I just wrote it on this little yellow Post-it note and I put it on my desk. And so back in I don't remember how long ago it was, 5, 6 years ago, Shannon finally decided to make me that plaque that just says always. And every single day when I walk in my office, I remind myself, no matter what happens today, it doesn't surprise God. And whatever I go through, He always causes me to triumph. So thank you for asking. There you go. All right, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that scouting report on Mostert, answering some of those questions. Got a real big surprise. All right, that may be hyperbole, but I got a really good podcast coming for you again tomorrow. I think you're really going to enjoy it. It'll be my next mock draft. And then Friday, we got a really good one coming for you Friday and Saturday and Sunday. So just get ready for them all. Remember, follow me on Threads and IG at Hondo SR, on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Hondo Carpenter, and always SI.com/NFL/Raiders. Well, we're just literally pumping out, I think today we did close to 30 stories where we're just giving you the most free information on your beloved Raiders. God bless you all.